the Young Turks. That's what you're watching. You know it, though. You know it. How would you accidentally fall upon this programming?
Now, one person's like, I wanted the Great British Bake Off.
Well, sorry, you're gonna get even better programming. You're gonna get news, you're gonna get laughs, you're gonna get memes, you're gonna get everything. You're gonna get informed through this show. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. I'm super excited.
Okay, I'm starting to get excited too.
You should be, you should be. I'm just really excited about today's show from beginning to end. In the post game, we will dunk on Dave Rubin.
I haven't seen this video yet.
It's one of the best videos. No, we're celebrating the wonderful content that he has provided the world. That's really what this is about.
Why doesn't he have the Medal of Freedom yet?
I don't know, one day.
The bar is a dropping.
Well, we'll see, we'll see. But we have an update on the situation in Iowa. We have Donald Trump taking his victory lap, but also simultaneously showing how salty he is toward Nancy Pelosi. So there's a little bit of a catfight going on there. And then later in the hour, we'll also discuss mom jeans and how it relates to Mitt Romney. I know that sounds like it's a story that lacks substance, and guess what, you're right, but it's gonna be fun. And we need to lighten things up a little bit because there's a lot of serious news as well. Without further ado, let's get started. There are some strange updates when it comes to the Iowa caucuses. It's been several days now since the caucuses took place, and after technical issues involving a new app that the Democrats decided to start using for the caucuses, and after releasing partial results little by little, now we have Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, calling for a recanvassing. So what does that mean? Well, on Twitter this morning, he wrote, quote, "Enough is enough. In light of the problems that have emerged in the implementation of the delegate selection plan, and in order to assure public confidence in the results, I am calling on the Iowa Democratic Party to immediately begin a recanvass." Now, as soon as he tweeted that, people were wondering, well, what does that mean? Are they going to redo the caucuses? Are they going to do a recount? I guess there were so many people asking so many questions that Perez subsequently tweeted, "A recanvass is a review of the worksheets from each caucus site to ensure accuracy. The Iowa Democratic Party will continue to report results." So it's different from a recount. A recanvass is a review of the reporting sheets. And there were inconsistencies that we talked about in detail on yesterday's show. Now, Iowa Chairman Troy Price suggested that he is open to recanvassing. However, the DNC doesn't have the authority to order that. Price said that he would do it if there were any candidates or campaigns that demanded it. And sure enough, Pete Buttigieg demanded it, probably because-
Is Price the manager? Did he finally get through?
Pete Buttigieg wanted to speak to the manager, he did do that. And I can understand why Buttigieg would want to do that, because as of this morning, with 97% of the precincts reporting, Bernie Sanders had a slight lead over Buttigieg.
Yeah, although, it's right there.
It's right there.
It's a tie.
So before we continue, let me just say, what matters, what counts is pledged delegates. And it appears that Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg will end up with the exact same number of pledged delegates, 11 each. Now, who knows, maybe through this recanvassing situation, things could change. We'll see. But when it comes to the popular vote, meaning the number of people who voted for Pete Buttigieg versus Bernie Sanders wins by 6,000 votes.
Yes.
I want to make sure that you all know that. That's what needs to be clarified.
I care more about the SDEs, honestly.
The SDEs don't matter at all.
I don't care.
And the amount of time wasted pontificating about that, and I'm glad that Bernie Sanders called that out, is ridiculous because it doesn't count at all. It means nothing.
Yeah. So a few things. So Bernie won the thing where it matters to win. Even there, it's close. No one supports Bernie Sanders more than me, but I don't need to be like, no, he got it. In the end, it's gonna be basically a tie. Yes, he won, and by the way, his path going forward is a million times better than Pete Buttigieg, which is why I don't care if Pete Buttigieg gets second. He's not gonna be the nominee anyway. But in the end, they're gonna get basically the same number of pledged delegates. And even if it changes, it's gonna go up by 1 for Bernie and down 1 for him. It's nothing, it's like 3% of the delegates you need at the end of the day. I am so sick of Iowa. But in terms of that update from Perez, important things for people to understand. One, not just for this, but it's important that you understand going forward the DNC does not control the internal workings of these primaries and caucuses.
They do not, no.
The individual state parties do. And so I give that information to you, and you did earlier, so that when you see people spreading conspiracy theories in the future, understand that if there is corruption, it's in the parties in the states. It's not the DNC, they don't control everything. But second of all, when he's like, considering the ongoing problems, I think we should have a recanvass. I don't know about you, but my reaction was, what have you been doing this whole time if not recanvassing?
Exactly.
It's to check the veracity, the authenticity. What were you doing if not doing that? You've had the results for 2 days.
So there have been so many different problems, and I'm gonna list those problems for you in just a moment. But first, a video that I particularly enjoyed today. It features Bernie Sanders asking a question from, a salty sounding reporter. I'm gonna keep it real. The reporter asked, well, look, Buttigieg is saying he won. Why should we believe you when you say that you won? And here's what Bernie Sanders had to say.
Mayor Pete's been declaring a win for days now. Why should people believe your victory speech over his?
Because I got 6,000 more votes. And from where I come, when you get 6,000 more votes, that's generally regarded to be the winner.
Did he wink?
No, okay.
Bernie Sanders has never winked in his life.
We're gonna have to watch that again, guys. I'm sorry, but like that
I have to be able
wink,
to see.
what he said, the substance of what he's saying is great. I had originally only heard the audio version of it, but the video is better because look at the swagger. Look at that.
God.
Look at him. He's like, yeah, I'm wearing this snazzy blue sweater. I'm looking good. I'm feeling good. You know what? 6,000 more votes. How about that? How about that?
Who taught Bernie to wink? Who's he been hanging out with? Is this a Cardi B thing?
No, I don't know.
Did Cardi teach him to wink?
I don't know where you've been, but Bernie's been cool AF.
I know he's been cool, but he doesn't generally like, I got 6,000.
No,
yeah, that's good.
That was a great reaction. Now let's get into all the different issues that have come up from the Iowa caucuses, because there are many. So I'm gonna fast forward in the graphics. The trouble began with an app, we've talked about this extensively, that the Iowa Democratic Party used to tabulate the results of the contest. The app was rolled out shortly before caucusing began and did not go through rigorous testing. The problems were compounded when phone lines for reporting the outcomes became jammed, with many callers placed on hold for hours in order to report outcomes. Party officials said the backlog was exacerbated by calls from people around the county, who accessed the number and appeared intent on disrupting the process. So people were purposely jamming the phone lines.
You were right the first time, it's country. It was all around the country.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but how, that must have been just a terrible mistake. Was it like they thought it was dominoes and they were calling in? Like, why would they try to do that?
Well, the people want chaos, right?
Yeah. Well, and also like it's posted on 4chan, and Fox has all day been defending like this campaign by 4chan trolls to destroy it. So like they do 36 to 48 hours of, look at these Democrats, they can't manage the system, it was chaos. Oh, right-wingers did it on purpose? They're okay. These Democrats can't manage, and the Democrats did definitely mess up in a million different ways, but it was compounded by an organized effort of right-wing trolls to try to make it impossible for people to get through on the night.
Look, Fox News is gonna do what Fox News is gonna do,
yeah,
right?
Point it out.
That is, no, I'm glad you're pointing it out, sure, but it's not gonna shame them into behaving differently.
What if I make a meme?
Fox News and the Republican Party, for them, politics is one giant Jello wrestling contest, okay? And so like Democrats will come in and they'll be like, I would like to now have a very classy debate about what's happening in the country. And they're like, no, I'm wearing a white shirt, okay? I'm ready to get in to this giant kiddie pool of Jello and get dirty. That's what Republicans do. I'm sorry for the imagery, but I'm trying to say
shirt?
They're trashy.
Yes.
They're gonna do what they're gonna do, which is why it's so important for Democrats to stop with this incompetence and be on their A game. Don't roll out a stupid app that hasn't been tested weeks before the Iowa caucuses. What are you doing?
And don't post the number publicly where people can access it.
Clowns. So, but by the way, it didn't stop there. There was more. In several precincts, The vote, or the total vote reported in the final round of the popular vote, exceeded the total vote in the first round, even though no one knew should have been allowed into the room between the two rounds. And in some cases, a viable candidate lost support from the first round to the final round, even though supporters of viable candidates in the first round were supposed to be locked into their first choice. So this is the kind of stuff that's been going on, okay? Incompetence, all sorts of weird inconsistencies being reported. And so, look, you're right, they should have been doing the recanvassing immediately once they realized that there were issues and that there were problems.
Well, and just clearly to double down on that, I would love for them to do a press conference where they just describe what they have been doing.
Right.
What has filled the past few days.
I wanna know a lot of things. I wanna know, first of all, who made the decision to give the contract to this shady organization with shady funders, the people behind the app essentially? How was that decision made? How many bids were included? And how did they even advertise the need for this app, right? How did this come about? I wanna know that. I wanna know the root of that problem.
Their job as a result of it.
Who's losing their job? I mean,
I suspect no one.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, because people who fail our democracy over and over again seem to get promoted over and over again. And this is, in order to prevent something like this from happening in the future, you need to find out exactly what went wrong and how it went wrong. But more importantly, you need to right this wrong in order to restore faith in our democratic process. Because what this does is it discourages people, it demoralizes people, and it also creates a situation where they hand Republicans all sorts of content to attack Democrats on.
And to try to drive them out of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's demoralizing.
So one piece of good news though is that the Bernie campaign has reported a new giant haul from their fundraising. So let's give you the details on that. Senator Sanders raised $25 million in January. Whew, that's a lot of money for 1 month.
That is a lot of money.
Just crazy. So he plans to use the windfall to immediately buy $5.5 million in television and digital ads across 10 states at a time when some of his rivals are shifting or cutting their existing ad reservations. Now, Joe Biden famously is bad at fundraising, which is incredible because he fundraises from big donors. But he doesn't have the type of support that Bernie Sanders does. Bernie Sanders does not take money from big donors or from super PACs. He only takes money from small dollar donors. And that means, hey, he's got a lot more support. And as a result, he's able to raise a lot more money, even rejecting big dollar donors. The $25 million haul is more money than any other candidate raised in any full quarter during 2019. That's why he's winking.
And it's greased with money. So that is an incredible amount of money. It is record breaking. The only thing bigger than it is Michael Bloomberg, as we discovered this morning, is spending 40% more than that every week on ads than his like Q3 or Q4 numbers. Every week he just throws it into ice cream ads and dog snout grabbing and stuff like that.
That's right, and he hasn't really been challenged on his record because he hasn't had to answer for anything yet.
We've got some a little bit later on.
But we will focus on Mike Bloomberg quite a bit in today's show.
Well, and on the fundraising, so that was January, that was before the caucus. I am going to predict that this week will be the single largest week for donations to Bernie Sanders. I know that he had a lot in his first week, he had a lot after he had the heart attack. But this, I think the frustration that drove, it's one of the reasons why I know everyone's freaking out about how this might have hurt Bernie. I'm not worried about that at all. The media has been 100% focused on Iowa for more days than it would have been under normal circumstances. And he's the winner, which means that people are seeing that. I just saw polls showing that the majority of voters are more likely to vote for Bernie after the Iowa caucus, so it hasn't hurt his chances. Everyone's interested in him. He leads in that metric in terms of who has had an increased number of people who want to vote for them. And he is going to raise more money than Mike Bloomberg can spend in a day or two.
Yeah, look, the big takeaway is that if you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, you cannot allow what's happening at this very moment to discourage you or make you feel demoralized. You gotta keep going out there, get active, do some canvassing yourself, make some phone calls, do phone banking, because regardless of what happened in Iowa, first of all, he did pretty well in Iowa. Biden did terribly in Iowa, and more importantly, things are looking good for him moving forward, especially in New Hampshire. So focus on the positive, keep fighting, don't get complacent, but just know that if we fight hard enough, we'll win. And I do have a poll question to ask you guys if you're interested in participating. It does have to do with Pete Buttigieg claiming victory prematurely. And so the poll question is, if it turns out Pete Buttigieg didn't win Iowa, will the media ever hold him accountable for falsely calling himself victorious? You can take this poll by going to tyt.com/Iowa, tyt.com/Iowa, and you have two options there, yes or no. All right, let's move on to the rest of the news. So we have more news on Pete Buttigieg today that I can't wait to share with you. Pete Buttigieg has decided to completely move away from his so-called progressive labeling. And that makes a lot of sense because clearly he's not a progressive. And he does have a lot of affection for the financial industry, especially Goldman Sachs. One piece of evidence for that is that he just hired a former Goldman Sachs executive as his national policy director. Now, this got pretty good coverage at CNBC, but I'm not seeing it reported anywhere else, to be honest. But it's
CNBC highly critical, I assume?
Actually, to be fair, CNBC did a good job with this story.
Okay, good.
They fact-checked the Buttigieg campaign, and so credit where credit is due.
In terms of what that person has actually done in their past.
Exactly.
Yes, okay, that's true.
So let's get to those details. So who is this person? Who's gonna be in charge of advising his campaign on national policy? Well, her name is Sonal Shah, and she worked at Goldman Sachs from 2004 to 2007. Those years are pretty relevant. As a vice president, that's according to her LinkedIn page. Now, she then worked for Google as its head of global development initiatives from 2007 to 2009. So she's had some pretty big roles in many of the corporations that have had problematic histories in some cases. So she developed and managed Goldman Sachs's environmental strategy, according to Chris Meager, who's Buttigieg's campaign press secretary. She trained bankers to ask environmental questions, managed the grants to nonprofits, and worked with their real estate team on how to build more green buildings.
Oh, that sounds good.
That sounds pretty good, right? Like, I mean, we like environmental stuff, right?
Yeah, and green infrastructure, that sounds good.
Well, CNBC did a little bit of fact checking. In contribution records filed with the Federal Election Commission from the period, Shah listed her occupation at varying times as investment banker, economist, and vice president. Investment banker is a little bit different from, some environmental activist within a corporation. Just putting that out there. Now, in early 2017, Shah also cheered President Trump's decision to hire a former Goldman Sachs executive by the name of Dina Powell. And so she is, well, let's look at the tweet first. Great choice, Dina Powell will be great. Trump hires another executive from Goldman Sachs. Okay, so she was hired as Deputy National Security Advisor. So Buttigieg's campaign also claimed that Shah worked at the Obama White House after the financial crisis. She doesn't advocate for companies. She cares about having the greatest social impact for people and finding new solutions to tough challenges that require the public, private, and social sectors to work together to find them. That's why she's teaching at Georgetown after leaving the White House. So wow, it's big, you walk away from the White House, it's a pretty incredible job, lots of prestige there, and you decide, I just want to be a professor, really want to connect with the students. But at Georgetown, Shah was a professor and the founder of the Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation. The center was founded with a $10 million donation from investor Alberto Beek, a former Lehman Brothers investment banker who is now focused on mining, hotels, wealth management, telecom, and tech sectors.
Which one's the green one?
Lots of philanthropic work going on there.
Yeah, look, and I'm sure if you go back through her past, there's some good stuff or whatever. But it seems like they are presenting an image of her past that isn't necessarily supported by a lot of evidence. And even if it was, I think that this hire, it shows what they're worried about and what they're not worried about at the Buttigieg campaign. Because for Buttigieg to have a path going forward, he could either try to maybe reassert his his former, like he'd made some comments that were very supportive of Medicare for all, like a billion years ago. It was 2, but he's changed a lot since then.
Yes.
He could do that, but you don't do that if you're hiring Goldman Sachs people. You understand full well what message that's gonna send to people. And so if you're doing that, it gives us a pretty clear signal about which path he is going to try to go for, and it is very much the one that Biden is receding from right now. You can and indeed should hire people from Goldman Sachs if your fundraising strategy is gonna be incredibly reliant on rich donors and from Wall Street specifically. If you're doing that, then you're not worried at all about the appearance that you're hiring people who theoretically might have been around that whole thing right before the economy collapsed.
Right, I think that's a great point. It's what a former Goldman Sachs VP represents at a time when wealth and income inequality is at an incredible, you see this disparity between the rich and the poor in America, and that gap continues to widen. People are very much concerned about the inequality and how you can redistribute the wealth in the richest country in the world. And Pete Buttigieg is like, yeah, like the progressive thing, it didn't come across as authentic because no one's buying it. So this Biden guy not doing so well, maybe I can go ahead and appeal to some of his voters. So he's made a political calculation here, but it's important to keep in mind that on one hand, you have a candidate who has been consistent in fighting for the same issues, the working class, his entire political career. And then on the other hand, you have Pete Buttigieg, a 37-year-old who's inexperienced, who was a failure as mayor of South Bend. The racial tensions in that county became much worse under his leadership or lack of leadership. And to see him just kind of have this fluid political identity depending on what's convenient for him in that moment speaks a lot of who he is and what he represents. So we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we have more news for you, including some of those Mike Bloomberg stories that we promised you. And there are some issues when it comes to conflicts of interest within the DNC. We'll share those details and more when we return.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you wanna get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna and John with you. So a few announcements, programming announcements. As we all know, the primaries we're already in. We're with Iowa, the caucuses happened or didn't happen. I don't know, it's been a mess.
Something happened.
The New Hampshire primary will take place next week. And as always, you can expect TYT to provide special coverage of that. So tune in, I will not be in town. So I shouldn't be on that graphic, but it's okay. The panel is gonna be great. We're gonna have Cenk, John, Nando. This is about the debate, I'm sorry. So the primary coverage is happening next week, but this is actually a plug for the debate that's happening tomorrow night. Okay.
You're here for that, right?
I am here for that.
Are you? Are you sure?
I am.
Okay.
I'm in a weird, giddy, happy mood. I don't know why.
You are.
I know. Okay, so Friday, February 7th, that's tomorrow. Coverage starts at 8 p.m. Pacific time, 11 p.m. Eastern. And on the panel, you can expect me, John, Cenk, and Nando. So make sure you check that out. It'll be lots of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
It is. You know what makes sense? 3-hour debate on Friday night. That makes sense. Thanks, DNC.
Yeah.
But you know what would make it fun? If we all hang out together.
I'm looking forward to it.
You guys.
We're gonna drink beer.
Be fun. We are?
I don't know.
Okay, let's start now.
And then one other programming note for all of you. Next week, TYT will be celebrating its birthday.
Ooh.
So February 14th is our birthday. That's when TYT started back in 2002. And so we'll be celebrating. You can tune in live at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific at tyt.com/live on February 14th.
Okay, that is a great photo. I love it. Can you put it up again? That photo shoot that I believe it was Cassie. It was at the Sweet 16.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite photo shoots. What is Cenk's expression in that photo? I love our expressions. They go together. I'm not sure what he's thinking.
You look good in that
Thank
picture.
You. We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. But thank you.
Except for Cenk, I guess. Yeah.
No, he still looks good.
No, he does. He does.
He's just not sure if he looks good.
I don't know. So a few member comments and then we'll move on. Sheik, your Buttigieg writes in and says, DNC, we'll keep recounting until someone other than Bernie is the winner.
Crunch those numbers again. Crunch them.
Yeah. Roger Stone's missing forehead says Bernie winking must be an instant meme. Totally agree.
Oh, we gotta clip that out.
I know, it's so good. I bathe in a very stable genius's tears, says Jello wrestling. No, this is straight mud wrestling.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, best case scenario, it's mud.
Yeah. And Callista says, oh, for the love of no more government sacks. I totally agree with you. Look, even if she was an employee at Goldman Sachs that didn't do anything wrong ever, just the optics of it is a bad idea. And the fact that he doesn't care what it communicates to the electorate says something about him.
Yeah, look, and I think it's great that, assuming this is who she actually is, that you want to get someone who has been working in green tech and all that stuff. That's great. I would argue there are probably people like that didn't work on Wall Street. Like you can't, like campaign staff, they're staffs in different ways. You don't have to go as like a first recourse. It's gonna be Wall Street. We'll hopefully find some good people at Wall Street, but it's gonna be Wall Street one way or the other. There are people, academics and activists and all that stuff that have on the ground experience in these issues.
Exactly.
And that we don't have to worry about their connections to big money and all that stuff.
Exactly, yeah, and the connections really do matter, because even if she's no longer working there, and even if she never did anything wrong in her tenure at Goldman Sachs, fact of the matter is she likely still has a lot of friends and connections at Goldman Sachs. And if she's advising Buttigieg on national policy, well, is she going to advise him on things that are incredibly friendly toward Goldman Sachs and the financial industry? Of course.
Maybe.
All right, well, let's move on to a billionaire who is trying to buy his way to the nomination, Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg, the billionaire Democratic candidate who's buying his way up the polls, has apparently deep ties to the DNC. And this is a problem that for some reason, no one seems to care about, no one seems to cover. It did get some coverage over at Sludge, a great publication that I highly recommend. And Sludge is reporting that his surrogates, his current surrogates, have seats on the DNC Rules Committee. So let's get into the details on who these people are and how bad this conflict of interest really is. As the Democratic National Committee establishes procedures for the Democratic presidential nominating process, 2 members of DNC rules committees simultaneously work on the campaign of former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Michael Nutter, the former mayor of Philadelphia, who is a member of the Standing Rules and Bylaws Committee, was selected by Bloomberg in December of 2019 to serve as his campaign's national political chair. Nutter was nominated by former DNC chair Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2013.
Oh, good.
I know, and he has served on the Rules Committee since 2017. How is that not a conflict of interest, especially when you consider that the DNC just changed the rules in order to accommodate Mike Bloomberg in the debates?
Coincidence. Yeah, so look, you can go too far with this. Obviously, if someone is involved in the DNC, they're going to have some connections to some politicians. I totally get that.
They shouldn't.
Any connections at all?
No.
But they work in politics. They're going to. I'm saying they can't be surrogates for a candidate that's running right now.
Right. I mean,
they
what do you
can't
mean
have
by connections though? Like,
it can mean anything. I'm saying obviously there's going to be something. They've worked in different areas, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz, her connection at the time in 2016, her prior connections to Hillary Clinton were way too strong. It implied that there would probably be some coordination. Obviously there was. That clearly goes beyond it. You can't be a surrogate for one of these candidates because that's not just like you were affiliated, you served on a board together. You're an active booster for their candidacy while you're setting the bounds that their candidacy will exist in. That's clearly not acceptable.
You know how we talk about the revolving door of politics all the time, right? So you'll have, let's say, a senator who passes all sorts of, let's say, Goldman Sachs friendly legislation. And then when he decides to retire from being a senator, he'll go ahead and work as an executive at Goldman Sachs. And then he gets paid handsomely for that, right? Like now imagine a US senator doing both at the same time. I mean, it's a little different, but not really, not by much. Like it's a conflict of interest when it happens in this revolving door of politics. It's even worse though when it's happening in the context of what's supposed to be a fair democratic process. And two things are happening simultaneously. You have people who are working on Mike Bloomberg's campaign and at the same time serving on DNC committees that make up the rules for how to proceed in this primary process.
Well, how about as a compromise? Okay, we won't freak out about those connections so long as no big rules have been changed that benefit Bloomberg. Wait, damn, we missed it.
Yeah, rules have already been changed. But look, we're not even done. Nutter is only one person who's serving in the DNC and Michael Bloomberg's campaign simultaneously. Alexandra Rooker, a Rules Committee member and superdelegate from California, was hired as a senior advisor to the Bloomberg campaign last month. Rooker, who was previously a lobbyist for the Communications Workers of America, is a vice chair of the California Democratic Party. Now, DNC Chairman Tom Perez nominated Rooker to serve as vice chair of the 2020 Democratic National Convention Rules Committee at a DNC Executive Committee meeting last weekend. How is this okay? How is this okay?
It's multi-layered. It's the involvement on the inside of what the rules are gonna be like, then working with the campaign to understand and potentially exploit those rules, and then crafting the rules to potentially benefit that person, and then at the end of the day, potentially voting to literally make that person president as a super delegate. That's amazing. They call that synergy in the business world.
I think this should be brought up in the upcoming Democratic debate. It's not gonna be brought up by the moderators, they don't care. I would be shocked if the moderators even know. But this is a great opportunity for a candidate, I'm hoping Bernie Sanders, to say, look at how deep this corruption runs. We have, I don't know if he's gonna be on the stage tomorrow night.
No, I don't, but I believe he's gonna be on the next one.
On the next one.
Or hypothetically would qualify and almost certainly will.
Well, I would still bring it up, and I would say, we have a problem with corruption in this country, and it doesn't end with legalized bribery. Here's an example of the corruption that takes place even in our own democratic process. And bring it up because the American people deserve to know about how this giant conflict of interest is taking place right now.
Yeah, well, and it's also it's great synergy with the Iowa caucus. Say, this Iowa caucus has shown to a lot of people that the faith that they might have had in the process isn't necessarily justified, and we do have to be worried about who is actually running this thing on the national level and at the state level. And if there's obvious conflict of interest anywhere there, we have all the more reason to be worried about it. And what do you know? It's there. Now, he's not on the stage right now, but thanks to a last-minute rules change, he'll be around soon. We're gonna talk more in the future, but I just wanna point out the connections between the DNC.
Mr. Sanders, your time is up. Your time is up, Mr. Sanders.
Wink. Right. No, I don't know.
Yeah. But you know how it is. As soon as you start saying something that makes sense, they'll cut you off.
Exactly, but people are primed, I think, to understand how delicate this process is. Delicate from the point of view of you actually wanting it to mean something and be run in an equitable fashion. And so I think bringing up these sorts of things would be incredibly timely.
Definitely. One other issue that I feel is important to bring up is that there was quite a bit of money donated to the DNC right before Bloomberg decided to run. And Bloomberg, according to Sludge, donated $320,000 to the DNC on November 19th, 2019 in 3 donations of $106,500 as well as $800,000. That same day to a joint fundraising PAC between the DNC and state Democratic parties. It was actually Bloomberg's first donation to the DNC since 1998. Gee, I wonder why he decided to donate so much money to the DNC right before he decided to start running.
And we now go to Jason Johnson on how he's still not an oligarch. Oh no, we don't have him. It's insane. It's insane, the many layers of connections, like even if he had nothing with the DNC, no contributions, no current people serving, his ability to spend $7 million a week or more, that would be enough to be worried. But his obvious influence over the party infrastructure, it could, like Russian oligarchs could learn something from Michael Bloomberg and might be in real time.
Well, look, if you're feeling discouraged, stop, because that's the last thing you should feel. You should feel empowered and you should feel strong and you should fight, because we got the people on our side, we got the issues on our side, and this is a good example of it. So I want to move on to this next story that has to do with Mike Bloomberg's ideology, what he actually represents, what he stands for. In a 2016 interview that was discovered by journalist Walker Bragman, Michael Bloomberg insulted the intelligence of various groups of people, including young voters who are supportive of Bernie Sanders. Take a look.
Solution to our problem is to improve education, not to try to penalize people because they are successful. If you don't have successful people, you're never going to have the wherewithal to help those who are not. We've tried socialism, it doesn't work. And I'll leave you with a thought. There was a guy, Bernie Sanders, who would have beaten Donald Trump. The polls show he would have walked away with it. But Hillary Clinton got the nomination for a variety of reasons. What did Donald Trump stand for? He stood for something, he called it democratic socialism. And the young people, I don't mean to knock young people, I wish I was one again, but young people listened to Donald Trump, to Bernie Sanders, and they said, yeah, democratic, that's good. Socialism, yeah, that's that social media stuff. Because our kids no longer learn civics in school, they no longer study Western history, they no longer read Western literature. We are trying to change and dumb down the system, and if you don't know what happened in the past, you're gonna have to relive it.
That was one of the dumbest statements I've heard someone make.
He dumbed down the system.
And what's ironic is he's attempting to call young voters dumb. And what he fails to understand is that it's not about learning civics in our public schools. In fact, history classes and civics classes are purposely narrow in what they teach students. But I think with the internet, people are able to, especially young people, are able to really look at other countries, other systems, and see what works, what doesn't. Do a true analysis and comparison between what we're doing, what other countries are doing, and what we can do to improve. And so to insult the intelligence of young voters and make it appear as though they don't know what socialism is and they confuse it with social media is ridiculous. But more importantly, he didn't get challenged on this, but he said, we've tried socialism, it didn't work. Really, what are you referring to when you say that we tried socialism and it didn't work? Because Social Security is a socialist program and it's tremendously popular, so popular that every time politicians try to cut funding for it, they get met with great opposition because Americans want you to keep your grubby little hands off of Social Security. Same with Medicare. Those are socialist programs. But I mean, it doesn't stop there. There are many socialist programs in this country.
Yeah, Twitter, TikTok, MySpace, great socialism media platforms.
It's just so, I mean, he's so dumb, and yet he ironically tries to make young people out to be the dumb ones.
No, imagine so since the 2016 election, the DSA's membership has, quadrupled more. They have a billion more. Imagine someone it's the DSA, it's something about social media, and they sit in meeting after meeting, and 6 months later, they're like, when are you gonna talk about Instagram? You think that's the surge of new activists and the candidates all over the country and the people canvassing and working on local issues and all of that, is that they've been bamboozled?
I mean, look, the only time a discussion about social media and socialism takes place is when there's a discussion about possibly turning it into a public utility.
Yeah.
So I assure you, young people know what they're talking about when they mention socialism.
Who is more aware and tapped in than activists like people who would have in the past couple of years entered the DSA? First of all, also, if we're talking about who knows the history and about different systems and stuff, these are people who for fun read political philosophy books and political history books.
Yeah.
It's exactly the opposite of what he's describing.
And then one other point I wanted to make about that clip, in the beginning, he talks about how Bernie Sanders would have beaten Trump. So he concedes that. Remember, this video is from 2016. And so he starts off by admitting something that's been proven in polling, that's been proven in polling that takes place right now, right, in this election. And then he realizes, oh man, I'm messing up. I'm giving this self-professed, democratic socialist too much credit. Let me go ahead and make his supporters out to be dumb. But it's not gonna work, right? So if that's the strategy he's gonna try to use, have at it. I don't know if it's gonna work out well for you if you're gonna insult voters. But by the way, he also insulted Midwesterners, which you're about to see in this next clip.
I don't know how many are familiar with the bathroom issue in the United States. Anybody know what I'm talking about? If you want to know, is somebody a good salesman, give them the job of going to the Midwest and picking a town and selling to that town the concept that some man wearing a dress should be in the locker room with their daughter. If you can sell that, you can sell anything. I mean, they just look at you and they say, what on earth are you talking about? And you say, well, this person identifies his or her gender as different than what's on their birth certificate. And they say, what do you mean? You're either born this or you're born that. And you know, I will say, in our prison system in New York City, we have to have the policy when you walk in, you know, drop your trousers, you go this way, you go that way. That's it, because you can't sit there and you can't mix things in a jail. That's a practical case of where you have to make a decision. But it's so many things that we are nuanced, and the social issues that we're very proud of achieving aren't believed by the vast bulk of the people.
So first and foremost, he is incredibly insulting to the trans community. There's no question about that. And then, I mean, he managed to insult everyone in that statement, because he goes after the trans community and refers to a trans woman as a man with a dress on, which is disgusting right-wing language, but you can expect that from a right-winger. That's what Bloomberg is. He was a Republican until like yesterday. But more importantly, his tactic in insulting voters, potential voters, is a disaster, which I'm actually very giddy about, because if you want to do that, have at it. I don't want him to win the nomination. This is what Biden does in a way, like he decides to antagonize potential voters. And this is what he did with, this is what Bloomberg's now doing with Midwestern voters. Like, you know, we're nuanced and we understand things, but you know, these people in the Midwest, they're dumb. They don't understand anything.
That's like a good, marvelous Miss Maisel impression right there. We are nuanced. I didn't get much nuance off of him. I didn't get any understanding. I don't think that Midwesterners are the only problem in this issue. I think that he comes at it from a really bad direction. And also, I think, like, if you want to get an idea of what a person's movement would be like if they had a movement. We know Bernie Sanders' movement. He has lifted up and defended both the rights of and the future economic and social interests of any number of different groups. That's his movement. Bloomberg is screaming to you, I am not going to try to push anything new on anyone who I don't think already agrees with me. I'm gonna run the softest, milquetoast, easily accessible campaign ever. I'm not gonna try to change anything in society. Like, Obama sort of had to be moved on same-sex marriage, for instance. Okay, if that had been Bloomberg, he's telling you, well, you can't do that because then you're gonna lose Midwest or anything. You don't wanna, like, rock the boat or anything. And so if people are already doing well, if you have an individual, they're already doing well, then maybe he's your man in terms of like the stock market or something like that. But if you have been victimized, if you have been attacked and targeted by past administrations, he's not gonna care about you because you're a political liability, hypothetically.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that he's a target-rich environment if he were to, God forbid, win the Democratic nomination. Because I mean, look, his big gay ice cream ad that's all you really need, right? But Trump, remember, he can go ahead and point to corruption and legalize bribery, even though he's exploited that system himself, even though he's a corrupt politician, even though he's broken the law while in office, it doesn't matter. Nothing sticks to him, right? But when it comes to Bloomberg and when it comes to Democrats, somehow Trump is able to demonize his political opponents for the very behavior that he engages in. And so I just see Bloomberg as a target-rich environment. I don't think that he has the ability to win the Democratic nomination, but he does have a lot of money. And he's been pumping out ads all over the country, and he's been able to experience this rise in the polls from doing absolutely nothing in campaigning. All he's done is raise money. No, he hasn't raised money. He's self-funded because he's a billionaire. But he's going out there and he's just putting money into ads. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I believe for historical perspective, although many people might not even remember this, back during the 90s, there was Ross Perot, who was like this rich guy who self-funded, he ran twice. He spent, I believe, check me, I believe he spent $70 million.
Wow.
That's like 8 days of Bloomberg. And that was a national story for years, was his self-funded campaigns. It was nothing. Tom Steyer has already blown him away in terms of the funding. But lastly on this topic, I just imagine, what if you're a trans American and you're looking at this and you're thinking, God help us if he ends up being the candidate. That I have Trump, who's actively trying to earn votes off of attacking me, taking away my rights, demonizing me and all of that, supported by right-wing media that is more and more hyper-focused and obsessed on trans people on a daily basis. And then who is the person who I'm supposed to look to as an alternative? It's someone who sees me as something that should be hidden. Maybe you have the right thoughts, but don't ever vocalize them. Don't talk about these people, don't advocate for them, because you might turn off someone that you've never even met.
And that's not what a leader would do, right?
Yeah.
Well, we got to take a quick break. Use the hashtag TYT Live to tweet to us during the break. We'll read some of them when we return. And when we return, we'll also share some stories about Donald Trump losing his temper with Nancy Pelosi. That's always fun. And the attacks against Senator Mitt Romney for voting to convict Trump on one of the articles of impeachment. It's just, they're so vicious toward him and it's insane. So we'll share that with you and more when we come back.